The dust hadn't even settled on their father's grave when Samuel Novak told his sister he was leaving, and Sophia knew in that moment that survival in the Nevada Territory of 1879 meant she would have to become someone she never imagined being. She stood beside the freshly turned earth outside Rhyolite, her black mourning dress already covered in the fine powder that seemed to coat everything in this unforgiving mining town, watching her only living family member pack his saddlebags with the cold efficiency of a man who had already made his decision days ago. "You cannot be serious," Sophia said, her voice catching in the dry air. "Samuel, Papa has been in the ground for less than 3 hours." Her brother would not meet her eyes. At 26, he was 8 years her senior, and she had always looked to him for guidance, for protection, for the kind of steadiness their father had possessed. But the man standing before her now seemed like a stranger, his jaw set in a hard line as he secured the leather straps on his horse. "I have been offered a position in San Francisco," Samuel said, his tone clipped and businesslike. "Managing a shipping warehouse. The pay is substantial, and there is nothing left for me here." "Nothing?" Sophia felt her hands trembling, so she clasped them together tightly. "What about the ranch? What about me? Samuel, I am 18 years old, and I have no one else." "You will figure something out. You always do." He finally glanced at her, and there was something ugly in his expression, something resentful that she had never seen directed at her before. "Besides, you were always Father's favorite. I am certain he left you well provided for." That was when Sophia understood. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the folded paper that the lawyer had read to them just that morning. Their father, sick with pneumonia in his final weeks, had left the ranch and its modest holdings to both of them equally, but with a crucial stipulation. If either sibling abandoned the property, their share would transfer entirely to the one who remained. "This is about the inheritance," she said quietly. "You think I will fail. You think I will be forced to sell, and then you can swoop in and claim whatever is left." Samuel's face flushed, but he did not deny it. "That ranch has been bleeding money for 2 years. Father was too stubborn to admit it, and you are too naive to see it. I am not going to throw my life away trying to save something that is already dead." "Our father built that ranch from nothing," Sophia said, and now her voice was rising, anger replacing the shock. "He worked himself into an early grave trying to make something of this land, trying to give us a future, and you are just going to walk away?" "I am walking toward my future," Samuel said. He swung up into the saddle, and his horse danced sideways, eager to be moving. "Goodbye, Sophia. I truly do hope you manage to make something of yourself." He rode away without looking back, and Sophia stood there until he was nothing more than a dark speck against the vast expanse of brown hills and endless sky. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sharp scent of sage and creosote, and she realized with a sinking feeling that she had exactly $43 to her name, a ranch with 24 cattle, a barn that needed repairs, and no idea how to manage any of it. The next 3 weeks taught Sophia more about desperation than she had ever wanted to know. She tried to hire ranch hands, but the men in Rhyolite either laughed at the idea of working for a young woman or made suggestions that left her face burning with humiliation. She tried to manage the cattle herself, but they were half wild and scattered across terrain she barely knew. She tried to make repairs to the barn, but she lacked the strength to lift the heavy beams back into place. Every evening, she sat at the rough wooden table where her family had once shared meals, eating beans and hard bread because she had no idea how to preserve meat or tend a proper garden. Her hands, once soft and careful, were now blistered and raw. Her back ached constantly, and every night she lay in her bed and wondered how long she could last before she would be forced to admit defeat and sell everything her father had worked for. It was on a Tuesday morning, exactly 24 days after Samuel had left, that everything came crashing down. Sophia had risen before dawn, as she did every morning now, to check on the cattle. She had managed to herd most of them into the eastern pasture, where there was still some decent grazing, but several had wandered off toward the rocky hills. She saddled her father's old mare, a patient creature named Daisy, and rode out to find them. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink when she spotted 3 of her cattle near a dried creek bed. She was guiding them back toward the pasture when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. She turned to see 4 riders approaching, and her stomach tightened with instinctive wariness. The man in front was thick-set and bearded, with small eyes that looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. She recognized him as Frank Dalton, a rancher who owned a large spread on the other side of Rhyolite. He had approached her father once about buying their land, and her father had refused. "Well, if it is not the little Novak girl," Dalton said, reining in his horse a few feet from her. His 3 men spread out in a loose semicircle, effectively blocking her path. "I heard your brother ran off and left you all alone out here. That does not seem very brotherly of him." "What do you want, Mr. Dalton?" Sophia kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "I want to make you an offer," Dalton said. He leaned forward in his saddle, resting his hands on the horn. "Your ranch is failing, girl. Everyone in town can see it. But I am a generous man, and I am willing to take it off your hands. I will give you $500 for the land and the cattle. That is more than fair, considering the state of things." $500. The ranch was worth at least $3,000, probably more if the cattle were in better condition. Sophia felt a flash of anger cut through her fear. "The ranch is not for sale," she said. Dalton's expression hardened. "Now, you listen to me, girl. You are in way over your head out here. A young woman has no business trying to run a cattle ranch. It is just a matter of time before something bad happens. Could be your cattle wander onto my land, and I am forced to deal with them as trespassers. Could be your barn catches fire in the night. Could be you have an accident out here where nobody can hear you scream. All sorts of unfortunate things can happen in the Nevada territory." The threat was clear, and Sophia felt ice in her veins. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a new voice cut through the morning air. "Those unfortunate things tend to happen a lot less when people mind their own business, Dalton." Everyone turned. A rider was approaching from the direction of the hills, moving at an easy lope that covered ground faster than it seemed. As he drew closer, Sophia saw that he was young, perhaps 24 or 25, with dark hair and a lean, weathered face. He wore dusty work clothes and a battered hat, and there was a rifle propped casually across his saddle. "This does not concern you, Vaughn," Dalton said, but there was a note of wariness in his voice now. "Actually, it does," the newcomer said. He reined in his horse next to Sophia, positioning himself between her and Dalton's men. "Miss Novak here is my employer. She hired me yesterday to help work her ranch, so any threats you are making to her are threats to me as well." Sophia stared at him. She had never seen this man before in her life, and she certainly had not hired him. But something in his calm, steady gaze told her to play along. "That is right," she heard herself say. "Mr. Vaughn is my new ranch hand." Dalton's face darkened. "I do not believe that for a second. Waylon Vaughn has not worked for anyone but himself in 3 years. "Well, times change," Waylon said pleasantly. "Now, unless you have legitimate business with Miss Novak, I suggest you and your men move along. She has work to do, and so do I." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. Then Dalton spat into the dust and jerked his horse's head around. "This is not over," he said to Sophia. "You think about my offer, girl, before those unfortunate things start happening." He and his men rode off, and Sophia watched them until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she realize she had been holding her breath. She turned to the stranger who had just lied for her. "Thank you," she said. "But I should tell you that I cannot actually afford to hire anyone. I barely have enough money to feed myself." Waylon Vaughn pushed his hat back and studied her with eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. There was something kind in his face, something that eased the knot of fear in her chest. "I was not exactly being truthful about being hired," he admitted. "But I was not lying about Dalton being a problem. He has been trying to buy up every small ranch in this area for the past year. Those who will not sell tend to have bad luck." "So why would you involve yourself in my troubles?" Sophia asked. "You do not even know me." "I knew your father," Waylon said. "About 5 years ago, I was passing through Rhyolite, flat broke and half-starved. Your father gave me work for a month, paid me fair wages, and never asked questions about where I came from or why I was running. I have not forgotten that kindness." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough over the past weeks. "My father was a good man." "Yes, he was," Waylon agreed. "And I reckon he would not want to see his daughter run off her own land by a bully like Frank Dalton. So here is what I'm thinking. I help you get this ranch back on its feet. In return, you give me a place to sleep and food to eat. When the ranch starts turning a profit, we can talk about actual wages. If it does not work out, we part ways with no hard feelings. What do you say?" It was too good to be true. Sophia knew that. But as she looked at this stranger who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, she found herself wanting to trust him. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "There must be easier ways to make a living." Waylon was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "Let us just say, I know what it is like to be abandoned when you need help the most. I would not wish that on anyone." There was a story there, Sophia sensed, something painful that he was not ready to share. But his offer was genuine, and she was in no position to refuse. "All right," she said, "but I should warn you that the ranch is in worse shape than it probably looks. The barn needs major repairs, the cattle are scattered and half wild, and I have no idea what I'm doing." "Good thing I do," Waylon said. He gathered his reins and gestured toward the cattle that Sophia had been trying to herd. "Let us start by getting these beasts back where they belong. Then we can assess the damage and make a plan." They worked together through the morning, and Sophia was startled by how much easier everything became with someone who actually knew what they were doing. Waylon moved the cattle with patient efficiency, reading their movements and anticipating their attempts to bolt. He showed Sophia how to position herself to guide rather than chase them, how to use the natural terrain to funnel them in the right direction. By the time the sun was high overhead, they had the wandering cattle back in the pasture, and Waylon was examining the fence line with a critical eye. "These posts are rotting," he said, jiggling one until it came loose in his hand. "No wonder your cattle keep wandering. We are going to need to replace about a third of them." "I cannot afford new posts," Sophia said. "We can cut our own from the cottonwoods down by the creek," Waylon said. "It will take time, but it will not cost anything except sweat." They walked back to the ranch house, and Sophia saw Waylon taking in every detail: the sagging barn, the overgrown yard, the chicken coop with its broken door. She waited for him to change his mind, to make some excuse and ride away like everyone else had. But he just nodded thoughtfully. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," he said. "But I have seen worse. At least the house is solid." "Do you want to see inside?" Sophia asked. "I should show you where you will be staying. There is a small room off the back that my father used for storage. It is not much, but it has a window and a decent bed." Waylon followed her into the house, and Sophia found herself suddenly self-conscious about the state of things. She had been too exhausted to do more than basic cleaning, and dust covered every surface. The dishes from her meager breakfast were still on the table. "I am sorry about the mess," she said. "I have been focused on the outside work." "You have been trying to do everything yourself," Waylon said. "That would wear anyone down. We will figure out a better system." He looked at the small room she showed him, with its narrow bed and simple furnishings, and declared it perfectly adequate. Then he insisted on making lunch for both of them, pulling supplies from his saddlebags that he had clearly packed with the intention of staying. He cooked beans and bacon in her father's old skillet, and the smell alone made Sophia realize how hungry she was. They ate in companionable silence, and then Waylon pushed his plate back and fixed her with a serious look. "I need you to be honest with me about something," he said. "How bad is your financial situation? Because if we are going to save this ranch, I need to know exactly what we are working with." Sophia took a deep breath and told him everything. The $43 she had left. The debts her father had accrued in his final illness, nearly $200 to the doctor and the general store. The fact that the cattle needed to be moved to the winter pasture in a few months, but the windmill that pumped water to that section of land was broken. The knowledge that Samuel was out there somewhere, probably waiting for her to fail so he could claim everything. When she finished, Waylon was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "All right, here is what we do. First, we focus on the fence and getting those cattle secured. Dalton was not bluffing about making them disappear if they wander onto his land. Second, we need to make some money quickly to pay down those debts. There is a cattle buyer coming through Goldfield next month. If we can get your herd in good enough shape, we can sell a few head. Not too many, because you need breeding stock for next year, but enough to give you some breathing room. Third, we fix that windmill before winter. I am handy with machinery. I can probably get it working again." "You make it sound possible," Sophia said softly. "It is possible," Waylon said. "It will not be easy, and there are no guarantees. But you have good land here, and your father built something worth saving. We just have to work smart and work hard." That afternoon, they rode out to survey the full extent of the ranch. Waylon asked questions constantly, wanting to know about water sources, grazing patterns, where the cattle liked to congregate. Sophia answered as best she could, but there was so much she did not know. Her father had always handled the ranching side of things, while she had helped her mother with the house and garden. After her mother died 2 years ago, she had focused on cooking and keeping her father comfortable, never imagining she would need to know about fence posts and water rights. But Waylon was patient, filling in the gaps in her knowledge without making her feel foolish. He pointed out which areas would have the best grass in different seasons, where the natural springs were that could supplement the windmill water, which cattle looked healthy and which might need extra attention. By the time they returned to the ranch house, the sun was setting and Sophia was exhausted, but it was a different kind of exhaustion than she had felt for the past weeks. This was the tiredness that came from productive work, from feeling like she was actually moving forward instead of just scrambling to survive. "You did good today," Waylon said as they unsaddled the horses. "I know this is all new to you, but you have got good instincts. You will get the hang of it." "I hope you are right," Sophia said. She paused, stroking Daisy's nose. "Waylon, I need to ask you something. You said you know what it is like to be abandoned. You do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but I would like to understand why you are really doing this." Waylon was quiet as he pulled the saddle from his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that he had introduced as Ranger. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful. "I had a sister once," he said, "younger than me by 4 years. When our parents died, I was supposed to take care of her, but I was 19 and stupid, and I thought I knew better than everyone else. I left her with our aunt in Kansas and went off to seek my fortune. Told myself I would come back when I had money, when I could give her a proper life." He stopped, his jaw working. "By the time I came back, 2 years later, she was dead. Typhoid fever. My aunt wrote me 3 letters begging me to come home because Sarah was sick, and I never got them because I was moving around too much. She died thinking I did not care enough to come." Sophia felt her throat tighten. "Waylon, I am so sorry." "It was 7 years ago," he said, "but it does not stop eating at me. I was supposed to protect her, and I was not there. So when I heard about your brother leaving you to deal with all this alone, it made me angry, made me think about second chances and whether I could do better this time." He looked at her directly. "You remind me of her a little, that same stubborn determination to keep going, even when everything is falling apart." "I do not feel very determined most days," Sophia admitted. "Mostly I just feel terrified." "Being scared and doing it anyway is pretty much the definition of determination," Waylon said. He managed a small smile. "Come on, let us get these horses fed. Tomorrow we start cutting fence posts, and you are going to need your strength." The next weeks fell into a rhythm that Sophia had never experienced before. She and Waylon rose with the sun and worked until darkness forced them to stop. They cut cottonwood trees and shaped them into fence posts, then spent long days replacing the rotted sections of fence. Waylon taught her how to use a post hole digger, how to brace the posts so they would hold firm, how to string barbed wire tight enough to keep cattle in, but not so tight it would snap in the winter cold. Her hands blistered and bled, but gradually they toughened. Her back stopped aching quite so much. She learned to anticipate what Waylon needed before he asked for it, and they developed a wordless communication that made the work flow more smoothly. In the evenings, they took turns cooking. Waylon was better at it than Sophia was, which embarrassed her until he explained that he had been living rough for years and had learned to make decent food out of whatever was available. He showed her tricks he had picked up, like how to make biscuits in a Dutch oven, how to season beans so they tasted like more than just mush, how to preserve meat by smoking it. They talked while they worked and while they ate. Sophia told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother's love of flowers that had seemed so impractical in the harsh Nevada landscape, about her father's dreams of building the ranch into something substantial, something he could pass down to his children, about Samuel and the way her brother had always seemed to resent the life they were born into, always talking about escape and opportunity elsewhere. Waylon told her about his wandering years, about working as a ranch hand in Wyoming and a silver miner in Colorado, about a brief stint as a deputy in a New Mexico town that had ended when he refused to look the other way while the sheriff took bribes, about learning that he was good with horses and with fixing things, and how he had started to make a reputation as someone you could hire when you needed a difficult job done right. "But you got tired of wandering," Sophia said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. I got tired of not belonging anywhere, Waylon corrected. There is a difference. Wandering can be fine if you are moving towards something. But I was just moving to move, trying to outrun my own guilt. That does not work. The guilt follows you everywhere. Do you still feel guilty? Sophia asked. About your sister? Every day, Waylon said. But being here, helping you, it feels like maybe I am making some kind of amends. Not to her, because nothing can change what happened, but to the universe, I suppose, trying to balance the scales a little. Sophia wanted to tell him that he did not owe the universe anything, that what happened to his sister was not his fault, but she suspected he would not believe her, and she understood that some kinds of guilt could not be reasoned away. So instead, she said, I am glad you are here. I do not think I could have managed this alone. You are stronger than you think, Waylon said, but everyone needs help sometimes. There is no shame in that. By the end of the first month, they had the fencing secure and the cattle properly contained. The animals were looking healthier too, now that they had consistent access to good grazing and water. Waylon had spent 3 full days repairing the windmill, and Sophia had watched in amazement as he dismantled the complicated mechanism, identified the broken gears, and fashioned replacements from scrap metal he found in the barn. Where did you learn to do that? She had asked. Trial and error, mostly, Waylon said, his hands black with grease, and a lot of watching other people who knew what they were doing. You can learn almost anything if you pay attention and are not afraid to make mistakes. They made the trip to Goldfield to meet the cattle buyer, driving 6 of their best steers ahead of them. Sophia had been nervous about negotiating, but Waylon coached her beforehand on how to assess the buyer's interest, how to hold firm on her price without being unreasonable. In the end, she got $220 for the cattle, far more than she had hoped. On the ride back to Rhyolite, with the money secured in her saddlebag, Sophia felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Hope, real, tangible hope that she might actually survive this. We did it, she said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Waylon, we actually did it. You did it? Waylon said. I was just there to back you up. That buyer respected you because you knew your cattle and you stood your ground. That is all you, Sophia. They stopped in Rhyolite to pay down her father's debts. The doctor seemed surprised to see her, and even more surprised when she counted out $75 to settle the medical bills. The shopkeeper at the general store was less gracious, muttering something about how he had expected to have to write off the debt as a loss. You will get the rest in 3 months, Sophia told him firmly, channeling the confidence Waylon had been teaching her. And I would appreciate it if you did not spread rumors that I am failing. As you can see, the ranch is doing just fine. Walking out of the store with her head high, Sophia felt Waylon's presence beside her like a shield. She had not realized how much the weight of those debts had been crushing her until it was partially lifted. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time since her father died, she felt like success was possible. They were heading back to their horses when Frank Dalton stepped out of the saloon directly into their path. He looked at Sophia with undisguised hostility. I heard you sold some cattle, he said. Good for you, but it does not change anything. You are still in over your head, girl. My name is Sophia, she said coldly, and the only person in over their head here is you, Mr. Dalton. Because if anything happens to my ranch or my cattle, everyone in town will know exactly who is responsible. Dalton's face reddened. You threatening me? I am making a statement of fact, Sophia said. You already threatened me once in front of witnesses. So if my barn burns down or my cattle disappear, the sheriff will have a very short list of suspects. For a moment, she thought Dalton might actually strike her. But Waylon shifted slightly, not threatening, just making his presence more obvious. Dalton glanced at him and seemed to recalculate. You are making a mistake, trusting a drifter like Vaughn, he said instead. Everyone knows he has a reputation for trouble. The only trouble I have is with men who try to intimidate women, Waylon said mildly. Funny how that keeps coming up. They left Dalton standing in the street, and Sophia did not allow herself to look back. Her heart was pounding, but she felt oddly exhilarated. She had stood up to him. She had not backed down. That was risky, Waylon said quietly as they mounted their horses. Men like Dalton do not take well to being challenged, especially by a woman. I know, Sophia said, but I am tired of being afraid of him. And you were right there. I knew you would not let him hurt me. The words hung in the air between them, and Sophia realized how much they revealed. When had Waylon Vaughn stopped being a stranger doing her a favor and become someone she trusted implicitly? Someone whose presence made her feel safe in a world that had seemed entirely hostile? If Waylon noticed the shift in her tone, he did not comment on it. But as they rode back toward the ranch, Sophia caught him glancing at her with an expression she could not quite decipher. Something warm and complicated that made her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with confronting Frank Dalton. The autumn deepened into winter, and the work on the ranch shifted to preparing for the cold months ahead. They moved the cattle to the winter pasture, where the repaired windmill now pumped steadily. They reinforced the barn and patched the roof. They cut and stacked firewood until Sophia's arms ached. They slaughtered one of the older steers and spent 3 days smoking and preserving the meat. Through it all, Sophia found herself increasingly aware of Waylon in ways that went beyond gratitude or friendship. She noticed the way his hands moved when he worked, strong and capable, and surprisingly gentle. She noticed the quiet humor in his observations, the way he could make her laugh even when she was exhausted. She noticed the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that made her breath catch. She told herself it was foolish to feel this way. Waylon had made it clear he was here to help her save the ranch, nothing more. He had never said or done anything inappropriate. He treated her with respect and kindness, but that did not mean he saw her as anything more than his employer, or perhaps a friend. But on a cold evening in late November, something shifted between them. They had spent the day repairing a section of the barn roof, and Sophia had slipped on the icy wood. Waylon had caught her before she fell, his arm coming around her waist with quick reflexes that probably saved her from a broken bone or worse. For a moment, they had stood there on the roof, pressed close together, and Sophia had looked up to find Waylon staring at her with an intensity that made her forget the cold entirely. "Thank you," she had whispered. "I will always catch you," Waylon had said, and the words sounded like a promise of more than just physical safety. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Sophia found the courage to ask the question that had been building in her mind. "Waylon, when you first came here, you said we would reassess the arrangement once the ranch started turning a profit. We are not there yet, but we are much closer than we were. Do you ever think about moving on, going back to wandering?" They were sitting by the fireplace, and the flames cast dancing shadows across Waylon's face. He was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "No," he finally said. "I do not think about moving on. Truth is, Sophia, I have not wanted to leave since about the second week I was here. This place feels like home in a way nowhere has felt since I was a kid." "The place or the work?" Sophia asked, and she could hear the vulnerability in her own voice. Waylon turned to look at her directly. "Neither. It is you, Sophia. You are what makes me want to stay." The words settled between them like something solid and real. Sophia's heart was racing, but she forced herself to ask the question she needed answered. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have developed feelings for you that go well beyond helping an old friend's daughter," Waylon said. He ran a hand through his hair, looking almost nervous for the first time since she had known him. "I know that is probably not what you want to hear. I know I am supposed to be here as your hired hand, and I have tried to keep things professional. But you asked, and I am not going to lie to you. I care about you, Sophia. More than I should, probably." Sophia felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. "More than you should? You are 18. I am 25. You are my employer. I am supposed to be helping you save your ranch, not complicating your life with my feelings." Waylon stood up, pacing to the window. "I am sorry. I should not have said anything. I will keep things professional from here on out." "Waylon, wait." Sophia stood as well, crossing to stand beside him. "You think your feelings are complicating my life? Are they not?" "Only because I have been terrified that what I feel for you is completely one-sided," Sophia said. The words came out in a rush, and she felt her face flush with embarrassment and relief in equal measure. "I have been trying so hard not to read too much into every kind word, every time you look at me a certain way, because I thought you just saw me as someone you were helping out of obligation to my father." Waylon turned to face her fully, and the expression in his eyes made her heart soar. "There is nothing obligatory about the way I feel when I am near you, nothing dutiful about how I find myself looking for excuses to make you smile, nothing remotely professional about how I lie awake at night thinking about you sleeping just a few rooms away." Then why did you think you should keep it professional? Sophia asked. Because you deserve better than a drifter with a guilty conscience and no real prospects, Waylon said. Because you should have the chance to meet other men, respectable men with steady incomes and family names. Because I have no right to ask you to take a chance on someone like me. Sophia reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact between them, and she felt him tense with surprise before his fingers closed gently around hers. I do not want respectable men with family names, she said. I want the man who stayed when everyone else left. The man who believed in me when I did not believe in myself. The man who catches me when I fall and makes me laugh when everything seems impossible. I want you, Waylon, if you want me too. For a long moment, Waylon just looked at her, as if he could not quite believe what he was hearing. Then, very slowly, he lifted his free hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing gently across her cheekbone. I want you more than I have ever wanted anything, he said quietly. But Sophia, you need to be sure, because once we cross this line, I do not know if I can go back to just being your ranch hand. Then do not go back, Sophia said. Stay with me, not as my employee, but as my partner, in the ranch and in everything else. Waylon's answer was to lean down and kiss her, gentle and careful and full of restrained emotion. Sophia had been kissed only once before, by a boy at a church social when she was 16, and it had been nothing like this. This felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure at the same time. This felt like the first moment of the rest of her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Waylon rested his forehead against hers. I do not have much to offer you, he said. No money, no property, no fancy name. Just these two hands and a promise that I will work every day to make you happy. That is more than enough, Sophia said. That is everything. They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and Sophia felt the last of her fear and loneliness melt away. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would not face them alone. Waylon had stepped in when she needed him most, and he was never going to leave. The winter months brought their own challenges, but they faced them together now, as partners in every sense. They made plans for the ranch, talking late into the night about breeding programs and water management, and whether they should try growing hay in the bottom pasture. They wrote to cattle buyers and consulted with the few friendly ranchers in the area who were willing to give advice. But they also made time for each other in ways that had nothing to do with work. Waylon taught Sophia to play chess using pieces he carved from scrap wood. Sophia read to Waylon from her father's small library, and they discovered a shared love of poetry that neither had expected. They took walks in the cold evenings, bundled in coats, watching their breath mist in the air, and pointing out constellations. In January, during a rare trip to town for supplies, they ran into the minister who had presided over her father's funeral. Reverend Matthews was a kind older man who had known the Novak family for years. He stopped them on the street, his eyes twinkling with what looked like amusement. Miss Novak, Mr. Vaughn, it is good to see you both, he said. I have been hearing reports that the ranch is doing well. I am glad to hear it. Thank you, Reverend, Sophia said. We have been working hard. I can see that, Reverend Matthews said. His gaze moved between them, taking in the way they stood close together, the way Waylon's hand rested protectively on the small of Sophia's back. I also could not help but notice that you two seem quite happy together. I do hope your intentions toward Miss Novak are honorable, Mr. Vaughn. Waylon straightened, meeting the minister's eyes directly. Completely honorable, sir. In fact, I have been meaning to ask if you might be available to perform a wedding ceremony sometime in the spring. If Sophia is agreeable, that is. He looked down at her, and Sophia felt her heart leap. They had talked around the subject of marriage in vague future terms, but this was the first time either of them had mentioned it concretely. I am very agreeable, she said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. Reverend Matthews laughed. Well, that is wonderful news. You let me know when you have settled on a date, and I will be honored to officiate, though I must say there is no reason to wait until spring if you do not want to. February can be quite lovely in its own way. They walked back to the wagon in a daze. Waylon helped Sophia up onto the seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. But before he started the horses moving, he turned to her. I am sorry if that was too presumptuous, he said. I should have asked you properly first, with a ring and a romantic speech. You deserve better than me blurting it out in front of the minister. It was perfect, Sophia said. She took his hand and squeezed it, though I would not object to hearing the romantic speech later. You will get it, Waylon promised, and a ring as soon as I can afford one. Sophia, I know we have not been courting for very long in the traditional sense, but I am more certain about you than I have ever been about anything. If you truly want to marry me, I would be honored to become your husband. I truly want to marry you, Sophia said, and not because I need help with the ranch or because I am grateful for what you have done, but because I love you, Waylon. You make me braver and stronger and happier than I ever thought possible. I love you too, Waylon said, and the words sounded like an oath. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. They were married in late February in a simple ceremony at the small church in Rhyolite. Sophia wore her mother's dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. Waylon wore new clothes purchased with money they could barely afford to spend, but he looked so handsome in the dark suit that Sophia did not regret the expense. There were not many guests, a few neighboring ranchers who had been friendly to Sophia's father, the shopkeeper and his wife, who had softened once Sophia paid off the debt, the doctor and Reverend Matthews. But the small gathering felt right. These were the people who had supported her, or who at least had not actively worked against her. Frank Dalton was notably absent, though Sophia had heard rumors that he was not pleased about the wedding. Let him be displeased, she thought. She had Waylon now, and together they were stronger than Dalton could ever be alone. After the ceremony, they held a small reception at the ranch. Someone had brought a fiddle, and they cleared space in the barn for dancing. Sophia danced with Waylon under the lantern light, his arms around her waist, and felt like the luckiest woman in the Nevada Territory. Happy, Waylon murmured, his lips close to her ear. So happy, Sophia said. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me hope when I had lost it. You gave yourself hope, Waylon said. You were the one who refused to give up, even when you had every reason to. I just had the good fortune to be there to see it. That night, after the guests had left and they were alone in the ranch house that was now truly their shared home, Waylon carried her across the threshold of her bedroom. Their bedroom now, she corrected herself. Everything was shared now, the work, the dreams, the future. As spring arrived and the land began to green up again, they fell into a new rhythm as a married couple. The work was still hard, but it felt different now. They were building something together, not just saving something from the past. They were creating their own legacy. In April, a letter arrived from San Francisco. Sophia recognized Samuel's handwriting on the envelope, and her stomach clenched with old hurt and anger. She had not heard from her brother since the day he rode away, and she was not sure she wanted to hear from him now. But Waylon, seeing her distress, took her hand. "Do you want me to read it first?" he offered. "Or we can burn it without opening it, whatever you need." Sophia shook her head. "No, I should read it. I need to know what he wants." She opened the letter with shaking hands. Samuel's message was brief and perfunctory. He had heard, through some mutual acquaintance, that she had married and that the ranch was doing well. He wanted to inform her that he had no interest in contesting the inheritance or returning to Nevada. He was doing well in San Francisco and had recently become engaged himself. He ended the letter with a stilted congratulations and a hope that she was happy. Sophia read it twice, looking for any hint of apology or regret, any acknowledgement of what he had done. There was none. Samuel had written to her as he might write to a distant acquaintance, polite and impersonal and utterly devoid of familial warmth. "He does not even say he is sorry," she said quietly. "He abandoned me, and he cannot even acknowledge that what he did was wrong." Waylon read the letter over her shoulder, and she felt his arms come around her from behind. "I am sorry," he said. "You deserved better from him. You deserved a brother who stood by you." "I have something better," Sophia said, turning in his arms to face him. "I have a husband who chose to stand by me even though he had no obligation to. That is worth more than a brother who shares my blood, but not my values." She took the letter to the fireplace and watched it burn. She felt no satisfaction in it, no sense of closure, but she also felt no lingering hope that Samuel might change, or that they might reconcile someday. He had made his choice, and she had made hers. Their paths had diverged, and that was that. "He is going to regret it someday," Waylon said, coming to stand beside her. "When he is old and alone, He is going to realize what he gave up when he abandoned his family. Maybe, Sophia said, but that is his burden to carry, not mine. I am done letting his choices affect my happiness. As spring turned to summer, the ranch continued to thrive. They sold more cattle at good prices and used the money to buy additional breeding stock. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men from town, who were willing to work for fair wages and who did not seem to mind taking orders from a woman. With the extra help, Waylon was able to focus on improvements to the property. He built a new chicken coop and expanded the barn. He repaired the ranch house roof and added a proper porch where they could sit in the evenings. In August, Sophia realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week, afraid to hope, before she told Waylon her suspicion. He had swept her up in his arms, spinning her around with a whoop of joy that had made her laugh and cry at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Sophia, we are going to be parents." The doctor confirmed it a few days later. The baby would arrive sometime in late winter or early spring, probably March. Sophia was healthy and strong, and there was no reason to expect complications. Waylon became almost comically protective. He insisted she stop doing heavy work, delegating the harder tasks to the ranch hands even though they were already busy. He brought her water constantly, worried she was not drinking enough. He read every book about pregnancy and childbirth he could get his hands on, most of which had information that was either obvious or completely wrong. "Waylon, I am not made of glass," Sophia finally said one evening after he had physically lifted her onto the porch steps rather than letting her climb them herself. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not going to break." "I know that," Waylon said, but he looked sheepish. "I just cannot stand the thought of anything happening to you, to either of you." Sophia softened. She knew his protectiveness came from a place of love, and also from the fear of losing someone else he cared about. "Nothing is going to happen to me. But you need to let me keep living my life, doing the things I am capable of. Otherwise, I am going to go out of my mind with boredom." They compromised. Sophia continued to handle the lighter ranch tasks and manage the household, but agreed to avoid anything too strenuous. Waylon channeled his nervous energy into building a cradle and carving toys for the baby. His nervous energy also went into preparing the small room next to their bedroom as a nursery, painting it cheerful yellow, and building shelves for baby clothes. The months passed in a pleasant blur. Sophia's belly grew round and heavy. The baby kicked and moved inside her, and Waylon would spend long minutes with his hand on her stomach, marveling at each flutter of movement. They argued good-naturedly over names, compiling lists and crossing things off and adding them back on. Winter arrived, and Sophia found herself moving more slowly, her balance thrown off by her changing body. But she was healthy and happy, surrounded by the home they had built together. When the labor pains started on a cold March morning, Waylon rode to town faster than was probably safe to fetch the doctor and the midwife. The labor was long and difficult, but not dangerously so. Sophia gritted her teeth through the pain, holding Waylon's hand until she was certain she was breaking his bones. The midwife coached her through, and finally, as the sun was setting on that long day, their son was born. He was red-faced and squalling, his tiny fists waving indignantly at being forced from his warm cocoon into the cold world. But he was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair that looked like his father's. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in Sophia's arms, and she looked down at her son with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Waylon was crying, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and son. "He is perfect," he managed. "Sophia, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Sophia's father, Thomas Waylon Vaughn. It felt right, honoring the man who had built the ranch and the man who had saved it. Thomas was a fussy baby, colicky and prone to crying at all hours. But Sophia and Waylon took turns walking him, singing to him, anything to soothe his discomfort. The ranch hands pitched in, taking on extra duties so the new parents could get occasional rest. The neighboring rancher's wife came by with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. As Thomas grew from a newborn to an infant, the ranch continued to prosper. They had a successful calving season with only minimal losses. They expanded their water infrastructure, building another windmill in the southern pasture. They paid off the last of the debts and even managed to save some money for the future. On Thomas's first birthday, they threw a small party at the ranch. The same friends who had attended their wedding came to celebrate, and Sophia stood on the porch watching her husband play with their son, and felt a contentment so complete it almost scared her. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking up at the sky. She was not sure who she was thanking, God perhaps, or fate, or her father's memory. Maybe all of them. "Thank you for bringing Waylon to me. Thank you for giving me the strength to hold on." That evening, after the guests had left and Thomas was asleep in his cradle, Sophia and Waylon sat together on the porch they had built. The Nevada night was clear and cold, the stars bright overhead. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Sophia asked. "If you had not ridden up that morning when Dalton was threatening me, if you had decided helping me was not worth the trouble?" "Sometimes," Waylon admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. The fact is, I did ride up that morning, and helping you has been the most worthwhile thing I have ever done." "What do you think Samuel is doing right now?" Sophia asked. It was not a question motivated by longing or regret, just curiosity. Her brother had become like a character in a story someone once told her, distant and unreal. "I do not know," Waylon said, "and I do not much care. He made his choice, and we made ours. I know which life I prefer." Sophia leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and warm despite the cold night air. "I prefer this life too. Every difficult moment, every struggle, it was all worth it to get here." "You built this," Waylon said, gesturing to the ranch, the house, the life they had created. "I helped, but you were the one who refused to give up. You were the one who stood up to Dalton and learned to run a ranch and turn this place from a failing homestead into something successful. I am proud of you, Sophia." "I could not have done it alone," Sophia said. "You gave me the courage to try. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. That made all the difference." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Then Waylon said, "I have been thinking about the future, about Thomas and any other children we might have. I want to build something here that will last, something they can be proud of, not just a ranch, but a legacy." "What did you have in mind?" Sophia asked. "We start breeding better quality cattle. We invest in improving the bloodlines, work toward having the best herd in this part of Nevada. We also diversify. Maybe we try horses or sheep, or a serious hay operation. We build this ranch into something substantial, something that can support multiple generations." He paused. "And when Thomas is old enough, we teach him what it means to honor your family and your land. We make sure he understands that success is not about running away to find something better, but about committing to what you have and making it great." "I like that plan," Sophia said. She smiled, thinking about the future they were building. "Though we might need more children if we are going to have multiple generations. One son might not be enough." "Are you saying you want more babies?" Waylon asked, grinning. "Maybe not right away," Sophia said. "Thomas is enough of a handful for now. But someday, yes. I would like to fill this house with children, with noise and chaos and love." "Then that is what we will do," Waylon said. He pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Whatever you want, Sophia, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." The years passed, and the ranch grew along with their family. 2 years after Thomas was born, Sophia gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline. 3 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named Henry. Each child was loved and treasured, raised to understand the value of hard work and family loyalty. The ranch prospered beyond their initial hopes. Waylon's vision of breeding quality cattle came to fruition, and the Vaughn Ranch became known throughout Nevada for its excellent stock. They expanded their holdings, buying adjacent land when it became available. They built a larger barn and a proper bunkhouse for the ranch hands who now worked for them year-round. Frank Dalton made a few more attempts to cause trouble over the years, but each time he was thwarted. He tried to divert water from the creek that fed their pastures, but Waylon took him to court and won. He tried to spread rumors that the Vaughn cattle were diseased, but no one believed him when inspectors found the herd to be healthy. Eventually, Dalton gave up and focused his hostility elsewhere. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the cattle. Caroline was bright and fearless, always climbing things she should not and asking questions that had no easy answers. Henry was gentle and artistic, more interested in drawing pictures of the ranch than in actually working on it, but they loved him just as much. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Waylon took Sophia on a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with a trusted neighbor and rode the train to the city, staying in a small but comfortable hotel. It was the first time either of them had left the ranch for more than a day since they had married, and the experience was both exciting and strange. They wandered the streets marveling at the buildings and the crowds and the sheer noise of the city. They ate in restaurants where the food was fancy and foreign. They went to the theater and watched a play that Sophia did not entirely understand but enjoyed anyway. On the last day of their trip, Waylon took her to a jeweler's shop. He had been saving money for years, he told her, wanting to buy her a proper wedding ring to replace the simple band he had been able to afford when they first married. The jeweler showed them an array of options, but Sophia's eyes kept returning to one ring in particular. It was not the fanciest or the most expensive, but it was beautiful, a simple gold band with a small diamond flanked by 2 tiny sapphires. "That one," she said. "If you can afford it, I would like that one." Waylon bought it without haggling over the price, and he slipped it onto her finger right there in the shop. The fit was perfect, as if it had been made for her. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the day I realized I did not want to spend another moment of my life without you." "I love you too," Sophia said. "You saved me, Waylon. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved me right back," Waylon said. "Before I met you, I was just drifting, existing, but not really living. You gave me a purpose, a home, a family. You gave me everything that matters." They stood there in the jewelry shop, holding each other, while the jeweler discreetly turned away to give them privacy. And Sophia thought about the frightened, desperate girl she had been 10 years ago, standing beside her father's grave and watching her brother ride away. That girl had thought she was facing the end of everything. She had not known that she was actually standing at the beginning of the most amazing adventure of her life. They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed. The children greeted them with enthusiastic hugs, talking over each other to tell their parents everything they had missed. The ranch hands had managed things perfectly in their absence. Everything was exactly as they had left it, and yet, somehow, it all seemed even better now. As the years continued to pass, they faced new challenges and new triumphs. There were dry years when the grass was sparse and they had to supplement feed. There were harsh winters when they lost cattle to cold and disease. There were seasons when prices dropped and money was tight. But they also had years of plenty when the rains came at the right times and the cattle thrived and the sales brought in more money than they had dreamed possible. They had summers of watching their children grow strong and capable. They had evenings sitting together on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. When Thomas turned 16, he asked his father if he could take on more responsibility with the cattle breeding program. Waylon agreed, and father and son spent long hours discussing genetics and bloodlines and the future of the ranch. Caroline, at 14, announced that she wanted to learn to break horses. Sophia was hesitant, worried about injuries, but Waylon taught their daughter himself, making sure she learned the safe way to work with young horses. Henry, at 11, showed no interest in ranch work but was becoming an accomplished artist. His sketches of ranch life were remarkably good, and Sophia encouraged his talent even though she knew it meant he might one day choose a different path than his siblings. On a warm evening in their 20th year of marriage, Sophia and Waylon sat on their porch as they had countless times before. Thomas was in the barn, checking on a cow that was about to calve. Caroline was riding the fence line, making sure everything was secure before nightfall. Henry was inside, working on a drawing by lamplight. "We did it," Sophia said quietly. "We built something that will last." "We did," Waylon agreed. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing across the ring he had given her 10 years before. "And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us, Sophia. Years to watch our children grow, to see what they make of the legacy we are leaving them. Years to keep building and dreaming and living this life together." "Do you ever regret it?" Sophia asked. "Giving up your wandering ways to settle down with a desperate girl and her failing ranch?" Waylon laughed. "Not for a single second. That desperate girl became the strongest, most amazing woman I know, and that failing ranch became a thriving operation that I am proud to have my name on. I got the better end of this deal, Sophia. I have always known that." "I am not sure about that," Sophia said. I think we both won." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought about her father and the dreams he had for this land. She thought about her brother, who had chosen a different path, and whom she had forgiven, if not forgotten. She thought about the day Waylon had ridden into her life and changed everything. But mostly she thought about the future, about grandchildren who would someday play in this yard, about the ranch continuing and growing long after she and Waylon were gone, about the legacy of love and determination and loyalty they were leaving behind. "Thank you for stepping in when I needed you most," Sophia said, squeezing Waylon's hand. "Thank you for never leaving." "Thank you for letting me stay," Waylon replied. "Thank you for loving me and building this life with me. Thank you for everything, Sophia." They sat together as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. The wind whispered through the sage, carrying with it the scent of the land they loved. Inside the house, lamplight glowed warm and golden. In the barn, their son tended to the animals with the same care his parents had shown for 20 years. This was not the ending of their story, Sophia knew. It was just another beautiful chapter in a life full of chapters yet to be written. But it was a good place to pause and appreciate everything they had built, everything they had become. The cowboy had stepped in when she needed him most, and he had never left. Together, they had created something extraordinary from the ashes of abandonment and despair. They had built a ranch, raised a family, and forged a love that would endure for generations. As Sophia rested her head on Waylon's shoulder and looked out at the land that was theirs, she knew with absolute certainty that every struggle had been worth it. Every moment of fear and doubt had led to this moment of perfect contentment. She had been abandoned by her brother, but she had been saved by love. And that love would be their greatest legacy, the thing their children and their children's children would remember long after the ranch itself had passed into history. The Nevada night was vast and quiet, the stars brilliant overhead. In the distance, a coyote called and another answered. The ranch settled into its evening rhythms, familiar and comforting, and Sophia and Waylon sat together, holding hands, watching their world unfold exactly as it was meant to be. Years later, when Thomas took over the full management of the ranch, when Caroline married a neighboring rancher's son and started her own horse training operation on the adjoining land, when Henry left to study art in San Francisco, but still came home every summer, Sophia and Waylon remained the heart of the family they had built. They aged gracefully, silver threading through their hair, but their love for each other never diminished. On the day of their 30th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Sophia stood with Waylon in the yard, where he had first defended her from Frank Dalton's threats. The ranch was even more prosperous than it had been, a true legacy property that employed a dozen men and supported not just their immediate family, but an extended network of people who depended on it for their livelihoods. If you could go back and tell that frightened 18-year-old girl what her life would become, would you? Thomas asked his mother during the celebration. Sophia thought about it, watching Waylon play with their grandchildren, his face alight with joy. "No," she said finally, "because if I knew how good it would turn out, I might not have appreciated the journey the same way. The struggles made the triumphs sweeter, the fear made the security more precious, and the abandonment made the love I found even more miraculous." She smiled at her son. "Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, if you are brave enough to keep fighting through them." Thomas hugged his mother, understanding in his eyes. He had heard the stories of those early days, of his uncle's betrayal and his father's arrival. He knew how close they had come to losing everything, and he understood that the strength and determination his mother had shown then had shaped everything that came after. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, Sophia and Waylon found a quiet moment alone. They stood at the fence line, looking out over the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. The barn that Waylon had rebuilt stood solid and strong. The house they had turned into a home glowed with lamplight and rang with the laughter of family. "We did it," Waylon said, echoing Sophia's words from years before. "We really did it." "Yes," Sophia agreed. "We did." And as they stood there together, hands clasped, watching the day fade into night, they knew that their story had become exactly what they had hoped it would be. Not perfect, because life was never perfect, but real and meaningful and full of the kind of love that transformed everything it touched. The cowboy had stepped in when she needed him most. He had never left, and together they had built a life worth living, a love worth celebrating, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply cherished, played out under the vast Nevada sky that had witnessed their entire journey from desperation to triumph, from abandonment to belonging, from fear to the deepest, truest love either of them had ever known.